Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel once before. So these guys are another relatively new addition to the Scottish beer scene, and it seems that they're focusing on more kind of unusual and not so well known types of beer. So the last beer that we had from them was really quite interesting and quite quirky within its style bracket, and the one that we're going to have a look at today is also meant to be a little bit like that. But it is a style that I very much enjoy, and it is one that I've heard very, very good things about. So very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. And I do look forward to trying more unusual beers from these guys over the next little while. So hopefully this is another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review. And as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head through to Glasgow once again. We're going to go to the south side to be specific, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Simple Things Fermentations. So this beer is another member of their Big Ideas series. It's number 8. It comes in at 5.5% ABV, and this one is a Scottish export. So it will be somewhat akin to a sort of 80 or 90 shilling Scotch ale. So a big brown sugary, toasty and bready type beer, this one. So yeah, as you know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a huge fan of these big brown sugary beers. Scotch ales, of course, the German Doppelbocks, the Belgian quadruples, some of the old ales, and I guess some of the barley wines can fit into that category as well. But yeah, absolutely love my big brown sugary beers. It's the Scottish Sweet Tooth. But yeah, this is a beer that was recommended to me once again by, and a brewery of course I should say as well, by Bilko, Billy Walker of Bilko and Brenny's podcast. Lovely guys who do a lot of podcasts around Glasgow and show you all the different beer venues and things around the city. So yeah, you will see him feature on the channel at some point in the future. Hopefully we can get through to Glasgow again and do a wee bit of out and about filming with him. So yeah, we'll figure that out for some time later in the year. But lovely guy, and do make sure you check out the link to their channel in the video description below. They're doing some really good stuff, and I look forward to seeing what they're going to release over the next little while. But yeah, let's crack on with this review then and see how we go. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Simple Things Fermentations before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to very regularly when I'm back at home in the motherland of Scotland, and otherwise just whenever I get the opportunity. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Simple Things Fermentations once again then. So Simple Things Fermentations, as I've mentioned to you already, are based through in Glasgow, and the company was founded by Phil Sisson. So he had been in the music business for a long time, and he ran the Strong Room recording studio in Shoreditch down in London. But he was also a homebrewer for a number of years, and he actually won the Great British Homebrew Challenge back in 2016, which offered him the chance to brew a beer at Thornbridge Brewery and have this beer distributed through Waitrose stores across the whole of the UK. But the beer that he won the competition with was called Raindrops on Roses, and it was a 5.3% Belgian wit with rose petals added into it, and it was supposed to be very nice. So I would love to see him re-release that and take a look at that. That could be very interesting. But Phil is originally from Cumbria in the northwest of England, whereas his wife is from Fife here in Scotland. And so they moved to Glasgow in late 2016 to be between their families, having lived in London for the prior 20 years. But when they moved to Glasgow, Phil wasn't exactly sure what his next career move was going to be. But he had been a home brewer for a while, and so he applied to Heriot Watt Brewing and Distilling Masters Programme and went there. But during his time there, he was involved in the Natural Selection Programme in conjunction with Stewart Brewing, where the students basically design and brew a beer, and then Stewart Brewing puts it out to market and they see how it goes. But Phil went on to work after that for Harveston Brewery in Alva before branching out on his own, officially founding Simple Things in 2019. But he basically wants to brew unusual styles of beer, and these form the basis of the Big Idea series, of which this beer is a member. And the brewery are continuing to kind of delve into history and find unusual types of beer that they can have a go at brewing, which I think is very, very cool. These guys are quite unique in that sense, but of course Epochal Brewing are kind of mucking around with lots of kind of funky and wood barrel fermentations and things like that as well. So yeah, it seems to be a little bit of a kind of historical trend, but of course we can go back to Williams Brothers Brewery and their historic series of beers that they've done as well. So there's always been a little bit of a market for that in Scotland, so I'm not surprised that these guys are doing pretty well in this regard. But the brewery itself can be found in the Muir End area in the south side of Glasgow, and it's located in an old Victorian workshop that was originally built as a bakehouse. But the brew kit they have is from PwC Systems, and they've been building up their infrastructure within the brewery for the last few years. But as of March 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced over 40 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt continue to rise over the next little while. So yeah, that is everything I can tell you about the Simple Things Fermentations company. If you do want to learn more though, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's everything for your history section in the video at the moment. They do have a blog on the website as well, where you can go and read really in detail about the build-up of the brewery and stuff like that if you're interested. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So the artwork on this one is a wee bit different from what we've had from Simple Things in the can. They do release some of their beers in cans, incidentally, and also some of them in bottles. I'm not sure if there's a particular rule about how they do that or whatever, if there are certain types of beer that they release in can and certain ones will be released in bottles. But you can see plain red bottle cap on this one, and it tells you a wee bit about this beer on the back. So it says, Big Ideas is an experimental range of beers focusing on the styles and ingredients we love most. Simple. We are Simple Things Fermentations. Our Big Ideas series is released in limited batches. This is beer number 8. Enjoy. But it tells you the malts in this one. So it contains Maris Otter, aromatic, wheat, rye and black malts, and the hops are Fuggles and Magnum, and it's got a Nottingham yeast in it apparently. So yeah, never heard of Nottingham yeast before, but that should be quite interesting. But as we said earlier, this one is a 5.5% Scottish export. In my experience, these beers tend to be kind of similar to the sort of 80-90 shilling Scotch ales. So just to explain that for those of you who are not familiar with this system, before the pound sterling was decimalised, it used to be shillings. I can't compare, I don't know how to compare these to pounds and pence and all this these days. But basically, with the Scotch ales, the higher in malt content they got, the higher the alcohol they were, and thus they had to be taxed more. So you had a shilling system on the beers. You could get 30 shilling, 40 shilling, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and you did even get, you do see some 160 shilling beers as well, which are just, you know, big malty beasts. Are absolutely lovely. But yeah, basically as you go up the shilling scale, you get more malt, then thus you have more alcohol, and thus the beer is taxed more. That's the main idea. So most of the beers that you see called Scotch ales or wee heavies these days, they tend to be sort of 80-90 shilling beers, but some of the really high alcohol ones, I guess you would compare to 160 shilling beers. But yeah, probably some of the most famous examples of Scotch ales in Scotland would be the Old Jock from Broughton Brewery is the very first one that came out. Skull Splitter from Orkney Brewery is another example of a traditional Scotch ale, and you also have, probably a more modern example would be the Old Parochial from Tempest Brewery. That's a very, very good one, and I would recommend that you try that. But it is always nice to see other breweries having a go at these traditional beer styles as well. I think the Scotch ale is a little bit underrated, of course, but yeah, I love them. I do really, really like them. But yeah, that is all I really need to tell you before we actually delve into this beer itself. So as I said earlier, check out all the links in the description below. But we will crack this one open. If memory serves me correctly, I bought this beer at Valhalla's Goat in Glasgow, which is a lovely little beer shop that I would recommend that you check out. So yeah, go and have a wee look at that. But let's crack this beer open and see how we get on. The Simple Things Fermentations Big Ideas Series number 8, a 5.5% Scottish export. Let's do this. This is one I've been wanting to review for a wee while actually. Let me just open this up. Oh, there is a wee bit of overspill there. yeah, not fun. Not fun. Yeah, that happens sometimes with these ones. So yeah, be careful with this one. Be careful with this one because it might get just a wee bitty excited. A little bit of bubble there, just as well. I've got a mat on the carpet, of course, so we need to wash the mat after that. But that's just how it goes sometimes. But yeah, there you are. This will be quite nice. But the odd thing with that is there's not too much sediment visible in the bottom of the bottle there. So that is pretty unusual. Let me just line this up so that my OCD is happy. There we go. Yes. Anyway, so yeah, this should be quite interesting actually. Yeah, so this beer I think would have poured with a lot more head if it hadn't kind of blown up a little bit. I think we maybe lost about 20 mils of it or something like that. Not too much though. It is a 330 milliliter bottle. I can't remember what I paid for this one actually, which is another point. But yeah, you can see there is just a nice ring of a sort of creamy coloured head there, just around the edge of the glass. There's nothing in the middle, of course, just a few little wisps. But yeah, the colour of the beer is a lovely sort of ruby. Yeah, it's a lovely sort of ruby reddish. A lovely sort of ruby reddish colour there. But yeah, I think that looks very nice. I've not seen a Scotch ale that's quite as red as this one in quite some time, I have to say. So that is very, very interesting. So yeah, there's one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass. You can see one or two little bubbles going up toward the bottom of the head there in this one. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice, I have to say. I like how this one goes about its business. But remember, the colour of the beer depends on 1, the type of malt that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrelation that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will also affect that as well, and that can be the case with these more kind of brown sugary styles. If it comes to imperial stouts and stuff, not so much. But yeah, in the case of Scotch ales and barley wines, you know, doppelbocks and stuff, it can play a role there. But to you guys on the camera, I can see this is appearing like a nice, very dark mahogany, kind of chestnutty type colour. But if I shine the light through this, it does have a very big sort of ruby coloured edge to it. So yeah, the way that this one goes about its business is quite nice. I have seen Scotch ales that are almost as red as this, but not quite. I think this is definitely the most ruby Scotch ale that I've come across in quite a wee while. So yeah, I don't think we need to say anything else about the appearance of this one then. Let's take a closer look at the aroma and see how we go. Oh, that's quite interesting. There is a wee bit of a funky sort of thing going on with this. Yeah. And this, I think, is going to be one of the interesting things because it's got a Nottingham yeast in it. So it's a Scottish export, but it has a Nottingham yeast. Not 100% sure about that. I would have thought there would be specialist Scotch ale yeasts that you would use in these kind of things. But yeah, the thing you're getting out of this, it has this really, just as a first impression, it's got a big kind of woody, funky sort of backbone to it. There's a bit of bread in there, a bit of brown sugar, and you can smell that sort of, you can smell the kind of herbally and grassy component of the hops, but it's also got a wee bit of fruitiness as well. But it smells like a very kind of old school, sort of funky type beer, this one. In a sense, it actually has a little bit of that kind of thing you get from some of the Apoco wood fermented stuff, actually. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma though and just break it down a bit more in depth for you. Yeah. Okay. So you actually do get a little bit of that kind of phenolic Belgian, you do get a little bit of that kind of Belgian Dubbel type phenolic vibe to it as well, which is interesting. But yeah, anyway, so backbone of the beer. If you sugar the beer up, yeah, if you sugar the beer up a little bit, so I would say the backbone of this beer definitely has a little bit of this kind of woody character to it. There's a little bit of a sort of dry woodiness in there, but I'm also getting some kind of bread crusty character out of it. It has this sort of brown, wholemealy bready type vibe to it, which I do find quite interesting. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, when you're examining this beer. There is just that kind of dry, woody character to it. It's got a little bit of that, it does have a wee bit of a it does have a wee bit of a kind of sort of fun, just dry, woody note to it, a little bit of bread crust, and then on top of that you're getting some kind of wholemeal brown bready notes. But yeah, there is just a wee bit of a woody, funky, yeasty type vibe to this one. But yeah, so on top of that, it does have just, within that kind of brown bready character, you do get this sort of phenolic-y, cakey type vibe out of it. I've described this before in like Belgian doubles and stuff like that. It's when they add candy sugar. The reason they get that in Belgian doubles is that they add candy sugar into these beers. You know, that's common in the double, the triple, and the quadruple. I'm not sure if they do it with the blondes right enough, but yeah, that is something that you need to bear in mind with those beers. So I wonder if there has been a little bit of a kind of candy sugar or something added into this, because it certainly does smell like it. But yeah, so on top of the kind of brown bready notes in this beer, you do have this little bit of a kind of like candied strawberry or something like that. It's really unusual, this. But this is what I've said before about Simple Things. They're doing like really kind of weird and unusual beers, and that's why they're interesting to try. After 3,250 reviews, you want things that are going to test your palate a little bit. So yeah, always happy to try random stuff like this. But yeah, on the on top of that, you're certainly getting a wee bit of brown sugar out of this one. There is a kind of toasty, caramelly quality in there. I do get a wee bit of a more oily caramel as well, but yeah, it's got that toasty, brown sugary McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing, which I do really quite like. So it gets a thumbs up from me in that sense. Yeah, aroma wise, the malty side of this beer is quite interesting, and the yeasty side of it is too. So yeah, a little bit more woodiness and crackery character coming out of it the further that you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, I think we can have a little look at the hoppy side of things. And I don't think we need to say any more about the malty side of the beer. So hoppy side of things, considering that it's Magnum and Fugels in this one, you get a little mix of both there. You do get a bit of brightness from the American hops, but you also get a wee bit of the kind of smooth and drier side of the English hops too. So you can certainly get a wee touch of earthiness in this one. There is a little bit herbal character. Those two properties can be attributed to the English hops more than the Magnum, although you do get, Magnum can be grown in a few different countries. I'm not sure exactly where this Magnum will have come from. It could have come from New Zealand, of course, as well. It's another thing. Germany, I think, too. But yeah, you do get a little bit of a you do get a nice little bit of a floral note out of it, but it's got quite a bright grassy character for me, and the grassiness that you get out of the aroma in this beer is a sort of wet grassiness too. So yeah, that's interesting. But the fruity side of this beer, I think, has a few quirky bits to it. So on the fruity side of things, yeah, on the fruity side of this beer, yeah, you do get that little bit of a phenolic kind of candy sugar sort of thing that I was talking about earlier, but for me, this one really leans towards a very kind of black curranty sort of vibe. I get a lot of black currant out of this one. There is maybe a wee touch of a, kind of like sharper raisin and blackberry, but no, I find this one, it's really kind of juicy and black curranty at the same time. So yeah, very quirky, very, very quirky. Other than that, though, I don't think there's too much that we really need to say about the fruity side of this beer. The hoppy select, the choice of hops on this one for me is quite interesting, because I think normally with a Scotch ale they would use Bramling's Cross from England, because that gives you these kind of nice fruity notes, and that's quite popular in the English barley wines. But another possible choice would of course be the Northern Brewer from Germany, which is popular in the Doppelbox there. And if I was smelling this blind, I would think that because of the wetness of the grassy character and stuff in this, I would have probably guessed that it was Northern Brewer. So yeah, just an interesting wee bit of stuff that's coming into my head there with this. But yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this one. Quite a few things authentic with the Scotch. It's a wee bit more woody than I'm used to with this style, and it's also got that wee bit of a Belgian double type, it's got a wee bit of that more kind of Belgian double sort of candy sugar kind of thing to it, the phenolic notes. So yeah, this is quite an interesting one, this. But let's take a look at it and see how we go. So this one is the Big Ideas number 8, 5.5% Scottish export from Simple Things Fermentations in Muirend in the south side of Glasgow. Let's get stuck in. Sláinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Yeah, it strikes me. You know what's interesting about this beer? It is bottle conditioned, obviously, but it sort of strikes me that the vibe you get out of this one is actually, it comes across it has a very similar mouthfeel to like a cask ale. So yeah, this is almost very similar to some of the old school kind of cask Scotch ales that you might come across in different pubs and stuff like that. Yeah, I remember back in the day, my dad always told me he was a big fan of the Green Mantle Ale from Broughton Brewery. That was the very first craft beer in Scotland. Unfortunately, Broughton don't make that anymore. But this one has a wee bit of that kind of vibe to it. Yeah, it's kind of like a slightly more blackcurrant. This is actually like a slightly more blackcurranty version of like Old Jock or something like that from Broughton Brewery. But it's got a lovely smoothness to the mouthfeel. That's the first thing that strikes me about this one. I think this could be a really interesting kind of core range beer for these guys, because they are brewing in Scotland, and I think it would be cool to see them do a beer like this as one of their kind of regulars. So I don't know if that's in the plans or whatever, but I like this one. I do like it. It's a big thumbs up from me. I like it when you get these like newer breweries, smaller breweries trying some different things. So yeah, I think we should go on with this beer. But get a hold if you do see this one, get a hold of it and see what you think. Yeah, lovely kind of. It's like a Scottish red beer as well, almost. I know you did get the Scottish red beers at one stage too, but this is pretty nice actually. So if we compare it to the shilling scale, I think this one's probably more akin to like maybe a 60 or 70 shilling, something like that. It feels as if it'd be a little bit lower, and at 5.5% as well. Yeah, I think we can probably say it's a 60 or maybe a 60 shilling, something like that. But very nice beer. That's the main point. You can debate about exactly what type of Scotch ale this is all day, but the main question is it nice? And the answer is yes, in my opinion. So yeah, let's break down the flavour of this one then and describe it as we always do. So, middle third of your palate. The other thing I'm going to say about this beer is that it comes across a lot sweeter than I thought it was. It's a lot sweeter and a lot smoother than I thought it was going to be from the aroma. So yeah, this is one of these ones that doesn't translate so well from the from aroma to flavour, in my opinion. But as I say, you get that sometimes, and I like this beer. So middle third of the palate then. Backbone of the beer, you get this lovely kind of, you've got a kind of mix of things going on there. So the backbone of the beer, you've got a lovely little bit of a kind of bread, like grainy bread crusty sort of thing. On top of that, there's a really smooth kind of, there's a really smooth sort of woody, oaky character coming out of the beer. Yeah, so you've got a lovely kind of smooth, woody, oaky type vibe to this beer. And I do really like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, a little bit of little bit of kind of brown bready bread crust in there, a smooth, oaky, woody sort of thing, and then on top of that you've got a mix of kind of wholemeal brown bread, but also a little bit of white bread in there as well actually. So it's really interesting how you've got that more grainy bread crusty character underneath, like a smooth sort of woody thing in the middle. It's almost got a wee bit of a kind of butter, like within the woody character, it's almost just got a wee bit of a butterscotchy note to it the further forward you come on that middle third of the palate. But then, as I say, you've got the bready notes sitting on top of that. In terms of the brown sugary layer then, sitting on top of the bread, this is kind of interesting as well. So, yeah, the brown sugary layer is interesting. So I mean, in the middle of the palate, on top of that bready layer, you've got a little circle there, and it's got a sort of toasty brown sugary note to it. But at the same time, the further you go into the aftertaste, it smoothens out. It really does kind of smoothen out a little bit, and then you start to get, you do start to get a little bit of a more you do get a little bit of that sort of like that phenolic candied red sugary sort of thing. So yeah, it's really interesting how that comes out of this beer. So you've got a toasty brown sugary circle underneath, a sort of candied blackcurranty red fruity sort of thing in the middle, and then on top of it you can feel there is a wee bit of in the very dead centre of your palate you do get a slightly more oily caramelly note to it. But what I would also say about this beer is that the brown sugars come across as quite leathery. Now when you get these kind of leathery flavours with the brown sugar, that usually indicates a slightly longer wort boil, and so I do wonder if that's what's going on here. But yeah, you also have to remember the yeast will kind of play a role in that regard as well. So yeah, this is pretty interesting from a few different perspectives. But yeah, bread crust, a smooth woody layer, a little bit of butterscotch in there, some brown wholemeal bread, a bit of white bread, then you've got that kind of slightly toasty biscuity layer, but it's got a bit of a leathery brown sugary note, some kind of candied phenolic fruity notes in there, and then a bit more of an oily caramel in the dead centre of your palate. At 5.5% though, you're not going to expect too much from the brown sugary side of this beer, but yeah, interesting to say the least. But let's focus on the back third of the palate, and I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate. So back third of the palate, that border region between middle third and back third, you get a little bit of a bready build up again. You can feel that the bread crusty note is a little bit more intense and grainy towards the back of the palate. On top of that, you've got a lovely thicker kind of you don't get so much of the wood in there actually, but you do get that thicker kind of wholemeal bready note, and I do get a bit of a kind of sweeter white bread as well, but you can feel that brown bready layer is a lot thicker in the back third of the palate, almost feels a little bit more airy as well. And then sitting on top of all that, you've got a more intense you do have a more intense kind of dense, you've got a lovely kind of intense, quite dense yeasty character coming out of this one, so I really like that. But yeah, the yeasty side of this beer is quite interesting, because when we had the West Coast IPA from these guys before, it really was very funky and farmhousey in a sense, but I actually find that the yeasty character, it's giving you this big dense brown bready doughy yeasty sort of thing, but I actually find it quite sweet in the centre, but it's got a little bit of a kind of more dry bread crusty character around it. So yeah, you've got, this is interesting on the back third of the palate, because you've got grainy sort of dry bread crust, a lovely thick and slightly sweet brown bready layer, then you've got the yeast sitting on top of that. But yeah, if you go between back third and middle third, you can feel the flavour is very, very tall. It's very, very tall. And as you go into the middle third of the palate, the flavour's just squash down a wee bit more and condense. And I think that goes together really, really well too. So yeah, I do really like how this one goes about its business also. So yeah, big thumbs up. Big thumbs up from me in this. Big thumbs up from me from the malty and yeasty side of this beer, and that of course is the most important side of things with a Scotch ale or export or whatever you want to call this beer. But I like it. I do think it is a little bit more akin to pardon me, a 60 shilling level beer, this one. So yeah, if that means anything to you. But yeah, let's focus on the hoppy and fruity side of the beer then. So, back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness there and a wee bit of herbal character as you move further forward. That will be the fugal coming out of this one. But then as you push further forward towards the front corners of the palate, you get a little bit of a more kind of bright floral aromatic note out of it. That will be the magnum. Round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and grassy. And of course, it is a wee bit more sort of zesty in that regard as well. But yeah, I think this beer goes about its business pretty nicely from that side of things. But yeah, it's pretty good. It is pretty good. Yeah, so a nice mix of German hop smoothness and a wee bit of the English hop kind of darker character as well, I guess we could say. But let's focus on that front third of the palate then and the fruity side of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up there. Base of the front third of the palate is a little bit of a more kind of smooth it is a little bit of a more kind of smooth brown bready kind of vibe there, and there's a wee bit of woodiness as well, so I like how that I do like how that goes together as well. But then on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's focus on that and see what fruity character we're getting from this one. So yeah, fruity side of the beer is quite interesting. I mean, you do get a little bit of this. It does have this kind of, again, phenolic sort of Belgian double kind of quality. So there is a wee bit of this sort of, you do get a little bit of an almost dried figgy kind of character to it. But I find it really leans towards this kind of black curranty sort of thing. It's a little bit like the front third of your palate's a little bit, you get a bit of that bready dryness toward the back of the front third of your palate, but it's got a wee bit of a kind of bready, it does have a wee bit of that almost like fruit loaf type thing. So for me, it's quite black curranty. There's a wee bit of a figgy sort of thing to it. Yeah, black currant and figs, I think, would be the best way to describe it. It doesn't really have such a raisiny sharpness to it. Or it doesn't really have a big blackberry character as well. For me, it's quite a wet black currant and figgy note that you get out of this one. So yeah, fruity side of this beer is pretty interesting, I have to say. So yeah, another thing that makes it worth trying for sure. But yeah, I think that is everything we really need to say about the flavour of this beer. So let's round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So as I said earlier, the mouthfeel was quite an interesting thing for me when I first tasted the beer. It's got this lovely smoothness to it. But yeah, on the on that kind of on the mouthfeel, I would say this is quite mid-bodied. It's right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation is smooth. It really just the carbonation is smooth, and it just gives you this lovely kind of it just has a lovely little bit of wetness to it as well. It feels very, very kind of clean in a lot of ways. But on the hoppy side of things, this one, I think it's maybe about 20-25 IBUs, something like that. The malt base, as we said, is really nice and smooth. It's got a wee bit of sweetness to it and a bit of toastiness, everything you'd kind of want from a sort of Scotch ale of any description. And you also just got a wee bit of a kind of fruitiness out of this one. I'm just surprised that the fruitiness is so wet in this and it's not a wee bit more oily, but that's a very, very minor sort of point, if you like. But overall, it's another very interesting beer, and I think that's what will keep me going back to Simple Things Fermentation, is the fact that they just do these really random, quite quirky beers. So yeah, gets a thumbs up from me in this regard as well. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Simple Things Fermentations as well, and we will no doubt return to them in some point in the near future. Check out my social media, check out their social media. This was the Big Ideas number 8, a 5.5% Scottish export, kind of like a 60 shilling in my opinion, from Simple Things Fermentations in Muirend in the south side of Glasgow. Make sure you check out Bilko and Brenny's podcast as well, and you will see them feature on the channel at some point soon. Maybe we'll do a Simple Things tasting together, something like that. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys on the next review. Make sure you check out this brewery as well.